This is our first Sunday together after you formally installed me as the 8th settled minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. And so before I begin my sermon, I want to express my gratitude for everyone who made it such a wonderful celebration. The people who planned the installation, who participated in it, and of course those of you who attended it. I think it was a wonderful celebration of the potential of our ministry together, and I'd like to invite you to join me in a round of applause for all who made it possible. With gratitude in our hearts, we turn to a subject which weighs heavily: the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. It's a matter that I have largely avoided preaching on over the years. I was raised as much secularly Jewish as Unitarian Universalist, and so I have complex emotions when it comes to the conflict. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I admired the state of Israel, the Oslo Accords, the peace process affirmed by Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, and Yasser Arafat, President of Palestine, seemed like a major achievement in the project of building a more beautiful world. Stories from friends and mentors about living on the kibbutzim made it appear that Israel was a place on earth where the old socialist dream of human equality still flourished. Captivated by the Jewish theologian Martin Buber's description of the kibbutzim as the location where a structurally new society might emerge, I briefly considered making Aliyah and migrating to Israel. But then Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing extremist. His murder came shortly after Benjamin Netanyahu was filmed speaking at a rally in downtown Jerusalem above a sign that said, "Death to Rabin." Netanyahu, now the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history, was part of a movement to villainize Rabin for daring to make peace with the Palestinians. For my part, I greatly admired the slain Jewish leader. He was someone who was willing to try to find a way out of no way and come up with a solution for two peoples to claim the same land, who claimed the same land to live together. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when I heard the news that Rabin had been assassinated, much in the way I suspect that people from my parents' generation recalled where they were when Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr., Robert Kennedy, or Malcolm X were when they learned that they had been murdered. Despite being complicit, or if not directly responsible for Rabin's death, the Israeli right was able to capitalize on his murder. Within 6 months, Benjamin Netanyahu was occupying the prime minister's office. And since then, he and his allies have dominated Israeli politics, controlling the country's government for the majority of the last 25 years. Now, my response was not to engage in the movement for Middle East peace. My family celebrated Passover, sometimes using Arthur Wasco's Freedom Seder, devoted as it was to the chant of rebellion, liberation, travail, and the creation of a new law, and filled with warnings that we all live under Pharaoh. I was steeped in a form of prophetic Judaism that demanded we engage in the process of tikkun olam, repairing and healing the world. There were many issues to be concerned about. I chose to engage with the struggle for economic justice in the United States. It seemed more immediate than matters developing across the ocean. And through that work, I developed an anti-nationalist perspective that held that the nation-state was one of the great deformations in global politics. Philosophers like Benedict Anderson helped me to understand that nations like Israel, the State of Palestine and the United States are imagined communities, political entities that are created frequently by elites rather than natural human communities. This is not to offer a complete autobiographical accounting of either the political perspective of my family of origin or activism over the last 3 decades. It's only to share that after Rabin's assassination, my politics could easily be summarized by a t-shirt that one of my indigenous friends used to wear, U.S. out of North America, as they could by any statement involving the State of Israel, or for that matter, the State of Palestine. On a fundamental moral and ideological level, I disagreed as much with Fatah's emphasis on the primacy of Palestinian nationalism over struggles for economic justice as I did with the Zionist project. I could not support Hamas's conservative Islamist politics any more than I could embrace the Israeli right-wing governments under Netanyahu and his allies. The first often involved the oppression of the LGBTQ community, anti-Zionism that slid into anti-Semitism, and is deeply undemocratic. The second has no interest in peace, is devoted to the seizure of Palestinian lands, and has repeatedly referred to the Israeli military's incursions into Gaza as mowing the lawn. The noted Jewish historian Avi Shalem has described that last phase as an operative metaphor, which implies a task that has to be performed regularly and mechanically without end. It's intended from preventing the people of Gaza from developing the necessary infrastructure to flourish. Given the Israeli right's interest in maintaining a certain kind of status quo, as their choice of lawn mowing as a metaphor might imply, it should not be a surprise that throughout much of the last 20 years, they've had a de facto alliance with Hamas. Until the recent war, Netanyahu maintained a policy of allowing the transfer of money from Qatar to Gaza. His objective was to support Hamas against Fatah, pit the 2 Palestinian political factions against each other in the hopes of preventing the emergence of a genuine Palestinian state. For my part, I was uninterested in the nationalist projects of Fatah, Hamas, or the Zionists. I thought and continue to think that the particularities of nationhood are a trap that bind working people to political and economic elites. Nationalist elites, as we are being reminded of during our own national crisis, the federal shutdown, care little for working people's need for daily bread. My perspective was not Israel this or Palestine that. It was found in Eugene Potier's words, "Working people, let us save ourselves. We declare common salvation." Common salvation, not the salvation of one nation or another nation, but the salvation of all of humanity. It's a perspective upheld in the values of our own Unitarian Universalist association. Every person is inherently worthy and has a right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. Within the Jewish tradition, I find it expressed most clearly in words from the Talmud. Anyone who destroys a life is considered as if they had destroyed an entire world. And anyone who saves a life, it is as if they have saved an entire world. In legalistic terms, it's best named in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all of the members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Common salvation, feeling like there were neither political movements amongst the Israelis or the Palestinians that were particularly devoted to this perspective. For most of my life, I've directed my attention elsewhere. Spent years working with indigenous movements in Mexico, organized labor unions, went to jail committing civil disobedience in solidarity with migrants in Arizona. I found inspiration for all this in the words of Jewish poets like Irena Klepfitz. She seemed to uphold the vision of common salvation when she wrote, "These words are dedicated to those who died, because they had no love and felt alone in the world." Her commemorative text invoked a sense of the universal value of human life, common salvation. Inspired by such visions, I studied to become a Unitarian Universalist minister while retaining a connection to Judaism. I celebrated Passover and Hanukkah each year. I occasionally attended temple on high holy days. When my son decided he wanted to have a bar mitzvah to preserve his familial connection to Judaism, found a rabbi who was willing to teach him how to read Torah and pray on Shabbat. And so my life went on with the conflict between Israel and Palestine in the background. It was there, but not something I thought about any more than I thought about fighting in Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, or the civil war in Sudan. I wonder if that experience is familiar to you. Have you gotten on with your life while the politics of the larger world, national or international, have played out in the seeming distance? I suspect that it's the way most of us move through the world. Then came October 7th, the largest act of violence directed against Jewish people since the Shoah, the Holocaust. The images were horrifying. More than 1,200 people were killed. Each life, a world destroyed. Hamas militants were documented celebrating death, a recording that emerged a few weeks after the massacre had one militant calling his mother to say, "Look how many I killed with my own hands. Your son killed Jews. Each life, a world destroyed." You might recall that my response at the time included the observation that the conflict did not start on October 7th. It has a much longer history. You might also remember that I lifted up the words of the Middle East advisor at the Pentagon, former Middle East advisor at the Pentagon, Jasmine El-Gamal. She wrote, "What is happening in Israel is not okay. It is horrific, horrendous, outright barbaric. What is happening to Palestine under occupation is not okay. It is horrific, horrendous, outright barbaric." The way to write this starts with believing that both of those statements are true. Tragically, since then, so many of us have watched in horror as Netanyahu's right-wing government has refused to pretend that those statements are both true, or to acknowledge that both those statements are both true. It has used the attack as an excuse to try to conquer all of Gaza. There's a long-standing trope in the Zionist movement found in the words of the current government and in works like Daniel Gordis's award-winning Israel, A Concise History of a Nation Reborn. The Palestinians are responsible for all of the discord between the communities. Whenever difficulties erupt, their standard pattern is to respond, in Gordis's words, with yet another round of violence. Since October 7th, it has become increasingly hard to believe such statements. More than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. Each life, a world destroyed. As Israeli forces have leveled most of the territories, hospitals have been repeatedly bombed. Each life, a world destroyed. Journalists have been targeted. Each life, a world destroyed. Famine has erupted as Israel has blocked aid, and the United States has ruled that the Israeli government has been committing genocide. Each life, a world destroyed. In an interview shortly after Israel launched its assault on Gaza, the Egyptian comedian Bossen Youssef made a satirical point that has proven to be prophetic. Responding to the conservative ideologue Ben Shapiro's claim that the way that you stop terrorism is with wildly disproportionate response, Youssef asked, "What is the going rate today for human life?" He then proceeded to demonstrate how throughout the last decades of the conflict, the exchange rate for human life has systematically devalued Palestinian lives. In 2014, he pointed out that the exchange rate was 1 Israeli life for 27 Palestinian lives. In the last 2 years, the disjunction has grown even greater. In theology and international diplomacy, there is a whole history of what gets named just war theory. It goes back thousands of years and typically includes a belief that violent action can only be justified in defense as a proportionate response to a harm that has been inflicted. Clearly, that principle has not been followed in Gaza. Nor do I suspect that any doctrine of deference, which argues that violent action on the part of one party can defer violent action on the part of another, will be shown to have been effective in this present conflict. The traumas that the current generation of Gazan children have undergone are far more likely to radicalize them into forms of violent resistance in their quest for liberation than they are to inspire them towards nonviolent action. It does seem possible, though, now that after 2 years, a form of peace and opportunity for collective healing might be on the verge of breaking out. Netanyahu and the President of the United States, without the involvement of Hamas, have laid out the framework for a peace deal. As we worship together, negotiators from both sides are preparing to meet in Egypt. I pray, and I hope you will join me in that prayer, that their efforts will prove successful and put Israelis and Palestinians together on the path towards common salvation. As I offer a prayer for peace, I think it is important to recognize the ways in which the conflict over there has impacted us over here. There is, of course, the numbing violence and the desensitization that comes along with it, the feeling that war is a routine matter that has wrenched many of our hearts as we have witnessed, in the words of the poet Mahmoud Darwish, Gazans suffocate inside their land that glimmers for the far upon the far. The daily rhythm of atrocities can make it possible to forget that each death is a world destroyed. The destruction of so many worlds destroyed has been accompanied by a coordinated effort to silence political and religious dissent. In the wake of widespread protests against the war on Gaza, many of those in power have conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. The state of Israel and Judaism are not the same thing. The Israeli people are not the entirety of the Jewish community. It is possible to critique one without critiquing the other. It's also possible to name the leadership and actions of Hamas as reprehensible without denouncing either Islam or the people of Palestine. Hamas and the people of Gaza are not the same thing. That should be obvious. Certainly today, I do not want to be held accountable for the government of the United States, the government of Texas, or even the mayoralty of John Whitmer here in Houston. his ongoing assault on our city's infrastructure is his responsibility, not mine. I suggest we extend the same courtesy to the people of Palestine. As we do, I think we should name that in the last 2 years, both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia have been on the rise. Just this past week, during the High Holy Days, there was a lethal attack on a synagogue in Manchester, England. Over the last many months, anti-Muslim violence and sentiment has grown to a level not seen since the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. Yet anti-Semitism has been weaponized by the president and his administration, while Islamophobia has been virtually ignored. To offer one example, as the president has pursued his attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the nation's universities, he's struck a deal with Columbia University. It stipulates that the school will not provide benefits to individuals on the basis of protected characteristics. Yet, at the same time, the school has agreed to provide benefits to one specific group and hire an additional administrator to support them: Jewish students. It's clear that the concern that this administrator is supposed to address over anti-Semitism issues will focus on those who speak out against Israel and not embrace the entirety of the Jewish community. Columbia is home to many Jewish students who have opposed the war, yet I doubt they will get much support at all from this new administrator. I share this and make the distinctions that I've made because they lift up a role for our religious community in these times. We are called to proclaim a common salvation and remind the world that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. Each time someone dies, we should say, with the Talmud, a world is destroyed. But more than just that, our tradition invites us to proclaim the equality of human lives. In our private lives, publicly, in our sanctuary, we can, and I encourage you to, make the distinction between Israel and Judaism, Hamas and the Palestinians, between the leaders of nations and those who reside in them. This is part of our religious tradition. It is something that we have to offer in these times. This brings me at the close to the title of my sermon: Is There No Holy Land? The conflict between Israel and Palestine is sometimes portrayed as an intractable religious struggle stretching back to time immemorial. Whatever truth there may be to that, the great subtext running throughout my sermon has been this: any place where the universal, not the particular of human life, value of human life is recognized is a holy place. And any place where it is not recognized has been profaned. Our calling in this difficult hour is not to say that this land or that land is holy, the providence of this people or that people. It is to say that anywhere has the potential to be a holy land where we come to recognize, as the Unitarian theologian William Ellery Channing taught, that we are each a living member of the great family of all souls. So in that spirit, I close with a prayer. Spirit of life and love, known by many names, God, Allah, the understanding of the universal value of human life, move through the hearts and hands of all of us so that we might do what we can to build a more beautiful, a more peaceful world, and live to see a lessening of conflict between Israel and Palestine, between all of the peoples of the world, both here and abroad. Shalom, peace, and amen.